Welcome to the Republican Professor podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Lucas J. Mather. Today we have Matthew Kirby joining us again. The last time Matthew was on was in April of 2022. Cannot believe it's been that long. It's so weird.
Doesn't seem like it.
Yeah. So welcome back, Matthew.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
It's really good to see you. It's also good to catch up. And we're, of course, looking at getting a cigar night going or cigar afternoon or whatever. And
That would be great.
yeah. So we were touching base about what happened to Charlie Kirk, of course the murder of
Mm,
Charlie Kirk, and you went to the memorial, so you offered to talk about what that was like, and I thought we would just
sure.
kick it off like that. I I'm really interested to hear your reflections on that, and I think it was something you said on Facebook or something. Maybe it was My Face or Spacebook. Some description that you had, it seemed very um, arresting and thought provoking for me. So I wanted to hear about it.
Sure. Well, let me give a little bit of background because I didn't plan to go to the memorial originally. It was on a whim, and that was sort of an interesting set of circumstances. But I wasn't actually a close follower of Charlie Kirk. I knew of him. I'd seen some of his videos, and I was closer with some people in his orbit. I followed Ben Shapiro pretty closely and some others like that. But I wasn't a regular follower of Charlie Kirk. I probably hadn't ever seen an episode of the Charlie Kirk show.
Mm.
And I was working. Happened to take a break or something and saw a post on X where somebody said, "Pray for Charlie Kirk." I thought, uh-oh, what's that? So I kind of did a little digging, and it didn't take long to figure out what had happened and realized it was pretty serious. And for me, it actually surprised me how much that struck me. I mean, I recognized objectively the significance of just how terrible it was. This young family man who's doing what we should all be doing, and taking advantage of in America, which is the opportunity to talk about important ideas in public and challenge, people's assumptions and things like that, and was presumably killed for that.
Mm.
But it hit me closer to home, especially as a parent, I think, just knowing what that would do to Erica and his kids. And um, so it moved me. And then like a lot of people, I went on a deep dive now trying to uh, understand more about who Charlie was and watching a lot of his videos and debates and things like that. And then starting to see a strange amount of criticism from some expected and some unexpected quarters. And I really didn't think about much else for quite a while. And so it was a little bit consuming. My wife noted that I was a little bit preoccupied, and I told her, yes, I am. I'm, having been in the Marines and being pretty close to the ground here, having my ear close to the ground with respect to politics and news generally. I'm sort of inured generally to news of tragedy, but this for me was pretty impactful.
Yeah.
And so anyway, my wife and I, he just hit 10 years of marriage in September, and we had planned this anniversary dinner at this nice restaurant in San Diego. And it just so happened that when we were able to get a reservation was the night before the memorial, and it had been planned, a month in advance. It wasn't the day of our anniversary, but it was several weeks afterwards. So I'm getting ready to go to dinner, and my friend who I'm really close with, and he's actually up in Fullerton, texted me and said, "Hey, I'm thinking of going to this," referring to the memorial. "Do you want to go?" And I'm getting dressed to go to this dinner, in the evening on Saturday. The memorial starts at 8 a.m. the next day in Glendale, Arizona, which is a 6 hour drive. So
Wow.
my immediate thought was, well, that doesn't really seem feasible. And
Yeah.
I am very reticent to broach this subject on the way to, our anniversary dinner, because we basically have to drive all the way through the night, and leave our wives with the girls and
Mm.
his kids. But anyway, the more I thought about it, the more I thought it seems like something that I ought to do. It seems like there's a sense about this event and about Charlie Kirk and about his assassination and the circumstances surrounding that were worth that sort of inconvenience. And so I kind of ran it by my wife, and she said, "Hey, you should do it." And so we're at dinner, and his wife is texting my wife, "Well, I guess our husbands are pulling an all-nighter to go to Arizona," or something like that. And
Mm.
so anyway, we didn't shorten the date or anything like that. We had a nice time. But when I got home, I threw some clothes in a bag, met him in Riverside, and we hopped in a car and took shifts. And I think he took the first shift, drove most of the way, and then I drove the last couple hours. We get to a Denny's at 3 a.m., which was about 2 miles from the venue, and slept in the car. I was restless, so I didn't sleep until like just before the alarm goes off at 5:45. So I was totally a zombie. But we get up and kind of stumble into Denny's and had a quick breakfast there.
That could have been misinterpreted.
Well, yeah, I think it might have been by what was her name? Debbie, who helped us. She works the 5 a.m. shift or something, and she said, "You going to the memorial?" And we said, "Yeah," So we assumed we weren't the only ones who had come in there, but she made some joke about that. Like she's like, "I don't care what it is. I didn't care if it was a hookup. If no one's causing trouble, then if you want to sleep in the parking lot, that's fine." But so we slammed some food and got some logistical insight from a couple of the waitresses there, and they basically advised us to park in this back lot and then just walk because the traffic was going to be crazy. The security cordon around an event like
Oh
that with
yeah.
basically the entire White House cabinet and
Oh my gosh.
all those who's who was just going to be nuts. So it was a good call to not try to drive. Um, and so we got dressed in our Sunday best, our blue pants, white shirt, red tie, and at about we thought we were making good time. We started walking probably around 6:30 or something like that, and we're in line with a bunch of other people who were trying to hoof it there, and everybody was very. It was like they were going to church. Everybody was very polite and nice and grateful to be there. And we walked really fast. At a certain point we started running because we realized there are going to be a ton of people here, and we want to make sure we get in there because we drove all this
Yeah.
way. So the closer we get, the denser the crowd is becoming, and we're realizing that there's not a whole lot of organization. People are just sort of making their way there. And we heard somebody say that there were 10,000 people there the night before, camped out in the parking lot. And we're like, whoa, okay. If there were 10,000 people here, then we really gotta be assertive and try to get in
Yeah.
there. So the closer we got, we made a game of trying to spot all the Secret Service snipers and everything on the rooftops, and pick out those things on our way in. But the closer we got, the faster we started going, and we were like, starting to sweat bullets. It was getting pretty hot. We weren't really dressed for, a 2 mile walk in dress clothes or, in the Arizona morning heat. But we had some interesting chats with people on the way in. People were decked out in what you would expect. A lot of American flags, uh, "Make America Great Again" hats, "Make Jesus Great Again" hats, lots of Charlie Kirk shirts and hats. "Live like Charlie." I saw one with the microphone, in the fist, and I thought,
Mm.
people uh, were really on it with respect to the merch and the representation. And I expected to see a lot of protesters just based on what I've been seeing on social media and that sort of thing, but I didn't see any. I think there were a few one-offs, but for being rather disorganized logistically, there's nobody telling us where to go or how to get in or anything like that. We were just following the herd. Everybody was pretty well behaved, for a crowd that size. And I don't know how many people were there when we got there, but I mean, tens of thousands with their families. People would break out into hymns periodically or worship songs or chanting, USA.
Mm.
And we just sort of tried to angle our way in towards what looked like the entrance and talk to people and say, "Hey, is this the right way?" or whatever. And nobody really knew. We eventually kind of got in to the right line, which was going through security, and there were several security layers, obviously. Um, and uh, I was I was recognizing in that even in that outer cordon that this was something that we were going to want to remember for the rest of our life because it struck me that the reaction to this terrible thing was not people being angry. It was not people. I mean, there was anger, obviously, but nobody was showing that. People were they were overwhelmingly grateful. They were praising God, and I'm thinking this is something unworldly in the best possible way. Um, and that really characterized the entire event. And I'll just keep going, but feel free to stop me if you have
No, this
questions
is
on
all
it.
great. I'm loving it.
Um, there was a woman who, on our way in, we started jogging, and she sounded like maybe she was from Texas or something. She was dressed in a long black dress, and she started jogging behind us, and she said, "Well, I'm going to draft behind you guys." And I said, "Well, that's fine. We're going to try to create one, but I'm just glad I'm not, wearing a dress or whatever." And she's like, "Well, this is actually uh, a lot cooler than what you guys are wearing." So she jogged with us for probably 10 minutes, and we just kind of weaved our way through the crowd, and um, we made several friends like that, the people that we probably will never see again. I met a guy on
Right.
the way in named Derek who um, was, he said something like, "Well, God is just going to do what he's going to do." We were talking
Yeah.
about how this was an amazing response to something like this. And met another guy named Steve who had driven 2 days from Missouri to get there. And he said the
Wow.
timing worked out well because he was able to see another friend of his who was on his deathbed the night before. And so
Jeez.
he was just super excited to be there and participate.
Wow.
And there was another guy who had 5 kids. He left his wife and 5 kids in Texas and came out there. And he was wearing a big old cowboy hat. I think his name was Jeremy. He was we stood with him for quite a while because once we got through the first security layer, we had to wait for several hours before we actually got through the security to get into the stadium. And so we got to know him a little bit, and it sounds like he kind of had a troubled past and turned his life around and gave his life to Christ. And
Wow.
so there's just all sorts of people there.
Yeah.
And while we were waiting in
So
that
it wasn't all white supremacists?
no, yeah,
It
I
wasn't.
didn't see any of that.
Oh,
It was
okay.
yeah. Um,
So
Contrary to what the news.
how many non-fascists were there?
Um, Probably 270,000. So if there were
Oh,
fascists,
wow.
they were dwarfed. I do think there was something. The estimates were something like that. They
Yeah.
had the stadium, which sat 90,000, and then there was the overflow, which they might have put a 10,000 in or something. I don't know.
Did you need a document to get in? Some kind of printout
No,
of something? Or
no, you could
just the ID or
nothing,
really?
nothing. Yeah, you could register, but they said it didn't help you get in. It was just a first come first serve thing, and
Oh,
after we realized how difficult it was going to be to get in there, I sort of regretted not registering earlier because some guy had told us that he registered and he got an email that said they were actually going to open up the doors an hour earlier than they were planning to. And so that's why we felt late when we got there because we thought we were on good time and they had actually changed it because they realized it was going to be so popular.
hmm.
But yeah, it was just a first come, first serve thing. And that's why we kind of were trying to, we put on our Mardi Gras hat and we were trying to like get our way in there.
That's awesome.
But we once we made it through that first security layer, there were uh, everyone was kind of lined up waiting to go through what was basically the TSA portion of the security to get into the stadium. And there we had to wait probably 2 hours. And so we got to meet a handful of people pretty well while we were standing there. It started to get hot, and so people were running out of water. And every 20 minutes, you hear somebody shout "medic," and people
Wow.
falling out from dehydration or whatever. And so people try to help. Eventually, they started passing out some water bottles, but it just overall, it wasn't. I don't think they were prepared for the response,
No.
and so they just didn't have. It wasn't like there were water stations clearly up or anything like that, and nobody really knew how long it would take to get in.
Hmm.
So,
Were
like
you
my butt,
allowed to bring your own water in or
you
your own
could.
food? Okay.
You couldn't bring anything. You couldn't bring like a thermos or anything like that. So people could bring water bottles. And so I had two, and that ended up not being enough, but we kind of made it work until we got resupplied later. But we were soaked in sweat, and at a certain point, we just untucked. My buddy took his shirt off because his heart rate was going up a little bit. We were just
Ooh.
worried he was going to get a little,
Wow.
uh, dehydrated or something. But there was cloud cover, and people kept making remarks like, "Oh, that's Charlie, looking out for us," or that's God's hand over this event and things like that. And we were grateful for it because even with that, it was quite hot. But
Oh yeah, Glendale, Arizona in September.
yeah,
It's summer.
yeah, yeah. And I mean, people were dressed all different ways, but a lot of people were in clothes that did not breathe well. We were in long sleeve, long pants, dress
Man.
shoes. Um, and you had people dressed in even heavier clothes than that. But yeah, I felt bad for the kids. This one guy had his 2 kids, and one was his 5-year-old son. He was having a hard time because he was lower than everybody, so he's crammed in there in like basically a hot box. So they put him up on his shoulders and stuff so he could catch some wind. But even despite all of that, and some people did, I think, call it quits because they were just not properly equipped for that kind of weight.
Wow.
Um,
Wow.
but what impressed me was that there were so many people who were willing to just stick it out and
Yes.
and do that, because this was not a sporting event. This was most people didn't even know who Charlie Kirk was. This was after the fact, but I took an Uber um, for a work trip to the airport, San Diego airport, a couple weeks ago, and ended up talking with my driver, and he lives in Temecula, 55 years old. He said we started somehow it came up that I went to Charlie Kirk's memorial, and he said that his wife had died 6 years prior from cancer, and he didn't even know who Charlie Kirk was before he was assassinated, but he had just picked up his wife's Bible as a result of that because he had been, watching a bunch of Charlie Kirk videos and like, obviously had heard what had happened. And not to get ahead of myself, but that sort of thing is happening all over the place, and that to me is very incredible. But that's how I felt at this event, that there was something happening here that was uh, it was not just a political event. It was not just a memorial. It was a worship service, right? And so anyway, we got in there and it was a free for all with respect to seating, so we were grateful to be in the AC finally.
Wow.
But it was hard to even find seats. So we got in
What
there.
time did you get in?
We got in probably around 10. So it officially started around 8. So they've been doing worship for about 2 hours,
How long had you been standing there sweating and all that?
a
Like,
couple of hours.
okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So we probably got into that holding position before the getting into the stadium at probably 8-ish,
Hmm.
and then we got in around 10. Um, and we had to go through several sections to even find seats. And we finally found these seats that were in the closest wedge to the left of the stage as you face it. So we're basically facing the same direction as all the speakers and looking at a screen on the back of the stadium. And not ideal seating, but we were just grateful to have seats at all because we
Yeah.
did try sitting in the ADA up against the railing. We're like, we'll just stand up here in the rail, and somebody shoot us off of that, so we had to go find some seats. But even sitting there or standing there, we were chatting with this woman who I think was from Texas. Her name was Rebecca, and I think she was there by herself. Had two adult sons apparently, but she I think she was impressed that we were there. I don't know. I think maybe she felt like she saw something in us that she wanted to see in her sons. She made a couple comments like that. I don't remember exactly. It was loud and we were talking, but like she took a picture of us in our seats. She said something to like send to my boys or something like that.
Hmm.
And I thought, well, I don't know what that's about, but I'm glad she was inspired.
Yeah.
But but so we got our seats, and the worship was I'm not normally very moved by modern worship music. I mean, I say that as somebody who plays once a month at church, electric guitar, in a
Oh.
modern worship service most of the time. I'm more moved typically by hymns when we do
Hmm.
those
Hmm.
because of the theological richness. But
Yeah.
this to me was very, very powerful. I mean, obviously the music was all very well done. It was done by the top in the business, right? Phil Wickham and Carrie Job and these guys. But what was impressive to me is that it um, there were so many people who were all engaged in that, and I'm sure there were plenty of people there who weren't believers and just were fans of Charlie Kirk or whatever. But what I was struck by is that I don't know how you could be there and not have been impacted, even if you came in there a skeptic or something with respect to Christianity. And I was very impressed with it's what struck me in retrospect was some of the lyrics that we were singing. I forget the name of the song, but the one it said it's talking about uh, God being above all dominions and powers. And I'm thinking, here we're all singing this, 90,000 Americans singing this in front of basically the entire White House cabinet. What a reminder I hope that was uh, to some of those that they are, despite being the most powerful people politically in the world, that they are still nevertheless in subjection not only to the American people but also to
Right.
God.
Yeah.
And so there was all of these connections that I was just really impressed by because I kind of went in there thinking like I don't know, maybe it's just going to be a big political event, maybe it'll be just like a more typical sort of we're going to share stories about Charlie type of thing.
Hmm.
And it didn't feel like that at all. It felt like it was a worship service. And in fact, there were several times where I just couldn't even physically sing because I was getting so choked up.
Wow,
And
man.
and so it was very, very powerful that way. At one point, we were singing the song "Holy." Chris Tomlin was leading that, and there was a guy several rows in front of me in a t-shirt. And can I curse on this podcast?
Sure.
I saw him turn around and look up at all the people, way up above in the stands, and he just mouthed the "Holy shit!" like, at everybody worshiping. And I thought it's just a a very raw expression of him being impacted,
Yeah,
and I appreciated that.
he got the holy part right.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. Yep. And I thought, isn't this how God works? He takes this terrible thing and brings all these people in from all over the country of varying states of belief and uh, puts on this very real display of what it looks like to humble yourself before a holy God, right? And you could nitpick songs that they chose or how things were done or whatever, but I'm honestly not interested in doing any of that stuff because to me um, it was done with the right intention, and it was uh, I think very, very powerful in a real way, and you could see God moving through that. I mean, Rob McCoy. So getting into speeches, Rob McCoy, who was Charlie's pastor, as I understand it, and in fact, I think your grandfather mentored Rob McCoy, didn't he?
Yeah, he did. Yeah.
I think I saw that. That's impressive.
I just saw him. The last time I saw Rob was Memorial Day weekend, which is when my grandpa's funeral was. He did the funeral. He
Mhm.
did both services. He also did my grandpa's 100th birthday, which was a couple years ago. My grandpa
Wow.
died when he was 102.
Wow.
Just this past year, we had the memorial service on Memorial Day, and so Rob was there to do the memorial service at the gravesite as well,
Mm,
which is a fantastic bucolic pastoral setting in Ventura County.
mm.
Uh, Lambs and sheep grazing and hawks, sky bombing, rabbits and stuff, and then it was Memorial Day weekend, so there were all these flags everywhere, all across the gravesite area.
And he was a
The
vet, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So he had the veteran. He was a World War II vet. So
Mm.
so Rob did the one at the church, which was my grandpa's church, and I've known Rob quite a bit. He doesn't know me very well, but I mean, we go back several years, actually before Charlie Kirk.
Mm.
I was in a small, I was in a Bible study with him in fall of 2017 where he was doing a God and government study. And at the time, he was the mayor of Thousand Oaks. He was the mayor of Newberry Park, Thousand
Mm.
Oaks. And so he was a political figure running as a Republican. He ran for state assembly as a Republican. And so he had this background as a politician as well as a pastor. And so he's doing this study on God and government. I think it was like on Tuesday nights or Wednesday nights. I can't remember exactly, but I still have the little brochure or whatever. And so he was a perfect guy to mentor Charlie.
I don't know him at all, but I was
Yeah.
impressed with his talk, and he
Uh,
did an altar call, which I was blown away by because again, I came in here with very low expectations for what was going to happen. I just kind of wanted to be there.
yeah.
Um, and so, he had people
Does
stand
not
who wanted to give
surprise
their
me that he
lives.
did an altar call. That's
Yeah, I
something my
mean,
grandpa would have done.
yeah, I
But my
mean,
and my grandpa would have given him a hard time if he didn't do it.
well, he did it. He followed through. And so he had people stand who wanted to give their lives to Christ, and then he did his talk. And then at the end, he told them he wanted them to stand again. And then somebody next to them who's a believer to, pray for them. And I saw people stand up all over. And I just saw this one guy, this big black guy, stand up and just bear hug his neighbor who he probably didn't know at all. And I was like, this is crazy. This is awesome.
There was
This
a
is,
black white supremacist there.
oh yeah, yeah. Very fascist, very yeah, hugging his neighbor and praying for them, that's as
Wow.
fascists do.
I know. That's how we roll.
Yeah. Humbling themselves before a holy God and praying for their neighbor, you know.
Yeah,
Um,
that's what caused the Holocaust.
yeah. 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 And so and yeah, as an aside, just having been there and then afterwards seeing some of the criticism people have tried to levy,
Man,
I'm
man.
just like these people are so um missing the mark. Uh, and I want to speak specifically about Erica's speech, but I've seen people even criticize that, and I'm like, how blind can you be? You know?
Can I ask a clarifying question about
Yeah,
that?
yeah.
When you say that, do you mean people that would also have been nonchalant about his murder or even celebrated his murder? Or are you talking about people that are on his side, on
Well,
Charlie Kirk's
both,
side?
both. I mean, I find it amazing that even if you're, say, not a Christian, and even if you had different political views than Charlie Kirk, or you maybe even vehemently disagreed with him on certain things,
Hmm.
I don't know how you could look at what people were doing at the memorial and say this is clearly a bad thing that they're doing, right? Uh, and I think there are people who believe that who you know they're like, oh, I didn't agree with Charlie on anything, like maybe like Van Jones, you know, I've heard him talk about this. Like I didn't agree with him on anything, but but I regret his assassination, and I regret, you know, and I appreciate that this is how people are reacting and that sort of thing.
Hmm.
So, but yeah, I have seen some strange criticisms from people that otherwise would mostly agree with Charlie about like the event or about people things where people are saying. And you know, I didn't agree with everything that I heard somebody say in the speeches, but that wasn't the point.
Hmm.
To me, I think it's important to focus on the good,
Right.
which there was a lot of, and not nitpick the things that.
That's a good word. Nitpick. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of nitpicking happening, and I just don't understand the goal of that. You know, you can say I didn't like this person's speech, or I didn't like how they said this, or whatever, and you can agree that overwhelmingly the outcome of the event was good and healthy and appropriate and awe-inspiring, I think.
Yeah.
Um,
I seem like I saw some criticisms. I'm just talking about like on social media. I don't,
mm,
just I saw some criticisms of people that were just they're always nitpicky about everything that um Trump does, I guess is what I'm
like
saying.
sort of the David French approach, you know, which is
Yeah.
I say I'm conservative, but I'm basically going to
Yeah.
attack everything that isn't a certain brand of conservatism or that doesn't, you
I
know, take the tone I would take or that sort of thing.
yeah, I think you're right about that. I'm not a huge um David French expert or anything. I've
Yeah, me
listened to
either.
his podcast a few times and um I have been annoyed by things. I try not to be nitpicky toward him,
Hmm.
but I understand where he's coming from and I understand why the New York Times hired him because and I understand probably the pressure he feels if he wants to continue working for the New York Times
Hmm.
because they're not going to hire somebody that is a Charlie Kirk fan.
Right.
I mean,
Right.
that's why Charlie Kirk was important. That's why he had the role he had is because he was filling a role, an important role on campus that really the Democrats on campus, if they control the campus, they deserve all the blame for it
Mm-hmm.
not happening. That's what professors were supposed to be doing. Why
Mm-hmm.
why did this kid have a job? He didn't he had a job because the professors were not doing it.
Right.
And I'm not even blaming all the professors because I understand that the administrators are actually a part of the problem here. And
Mm-hmm.
then, okay, why are the administrators acting the way they're acting? Because of regulation and the structures. The students are totally ignorant in many ways, as you can see.
Mm-hmm.
It was a student that murdered Charlie Kirk. The toxicity is multidimensional. It's coming from the students. It's coming from the parents. It's coming from the regulations and the constant threat of lawsuits.
Mm,
and the administrators are caught in the middle, and then the professors don't even know which way is up anymore.
hmm
They're being evaluated by the students, which is actually that's actually a structural problem. Whoever evaluates you is your boss. And
right,
so these are the people that are evaluating you. Well, you will do what they want you to do to some extent.
right.
And some of
It's
them are
exactly
murderers.
backwards. Yeah,
Yeah, they're murderers. And a lot of them don't care about murder. They don't care about, they don't believe in free speech. They don't believe in the Constitution and stuff that Charlie was defending.
I mean, yeah, just getting into some of the reaction to his assassination, was really surprised by how widespread. I mean, there's always going to be people who have toxic takes, but how widespread the celebratory impulse was on not only on social media but in real life from people. So that I saw this video of the Kristen Edwards. She was doing a talk at University of Montana or somewhere, and she found out during her talk that Charlie Kirk had been shot, and she knew Charlie, and she mentioned that to the students. There were 200 students in there, and most of them started cheering when they heard he had been shot. And one of them stood up and she said, "Why are you guys cheering? Like, this is my friend who got shot or something." And one guy stood up and said, "This is what happens in war," or something like that. And to me, that's wild, and it's evidence of a very concerning trajectory that we're on. I mean, you could slice it up different ways. You could say, well, it's really the young. It's not so much the older people. You could say it's these ignorant students or whatever. But the fact that we have substantial pockets of our society that make it possible or encourage that sort of behavior is really concerning. So when I heard Ben Shapiro say, we will pick up that bloody microphone where he left it, and I thought, yes, that's the right response. Like, we're
Yeah,
going to double down on that,
double down.
and we should all be doing that,
I agree. And I
at
think
one
it
level or another.
seems like a lot of people have been stepping up.
Hmm
I I just no, I know I felt more pressure.
hmm
It's not like I didn't have pressure before, but I feel even more responsibility to keep going.
hmm
And I've been very impressed I haven't watched all of his shows and stuff,
hmm
but I've been just seeing like outtakes on social media, and I've been very impressed with people stepping up to fill in for his show. And
hmm
I don't know how his wife is doing it. I
Yeah, I don't either. I mean, I I told my wife that. I said when I saw Erica get up there and talk at all, but also forgive her husband's assassin in front of, streaming 100 million people, but in person 90,000 people. I thought she's a better woman than I would be in that context. I mean,
Yeah.
I was really, really impressed by that. And by the way, when she did that, which I wasn't sure if she was going to do, um, to me, that was the spiritual equivalent of a supernova or
Wow.
a nuclear weapon, I thought, because
Whoa.
here is the most um, radically uh, unnatural thing
Hmm.
that she's doing, right? The most natural thing is we're going to talk about how we're going to, you know, get vengeance. We're going to, shake our fist. We're going to be angry. And she has every right to think that way.
Wow.
But you could see her almost wrestling with God as she's delivering that and
Wow.
saying, I know this is what I ought to do, and doing that in Jesus's name. And I thought, how can you see that and then be critical? And I saw people even be critical of that, not in person, but I mean on social media afterwards. And I just thought, well, uh, there is such a thing as spiritual blindness, and people who have ears to hear will hear that, and many have, and some just won't. But I really appreciated that she did that, and I don't know how she did it. It must have been by the power of the Holy Spirit.
Can I ask you what you think about this Facebook post I did? Um,
Yeah.
I'm kind of putting you on the spot, I guess, but here it is right here. Um, can you see it?
Oh yeah. hmm
Okay. I said, if I had been Erica Kirk, I would have said, if he repents, forgiveness is available. That's not quite what she said. Man, I could not believe how many different responses I got to this.
Mm.
It was just, I don't know if you've taken a look at any of this. I know I'm kind of putting you on the spot, but
I did see that you had posted this. I hadn't looked at all of people's responses,
oh my
but
gosh. There are people that said that's not in the Bible, and
mm.
um, I responded to a bunch of them. Um, some of it was good-hearted, some of it was like kind of made me upset a little bit.
Well, if I
Um,
can I give you my
yeah,
take on what you're saying, and you can
sure,
correct me
yeah.
if I'm wrong. I mean, what I think Erica was doing is freeing herself from the burden of being bitter and hateful towards her husband's assassin, which is
hmm
very natural.
hmm
Um, but her forgiving him does not stand in for the need for his own repentance. I mean, he still has to go to God and say, I have
Right.
done this terrible thing. I cannot save myself. Will you forgive me? Will you save me? Right. So
Yeah.
I do think those are two different things. And it sounds like that's what you're referring to, right?
Yeah, I think I think that's insightful. Um, the the issue of it seems like there's an equivocation on the term forgiveness, where
Mm,
it's the same spelling, but we mean two different things by it.
mm.
Um, because, and I'm not nitpicking her. I mean, I'm hoping that you're not thinking that I was like
No,
one
yeah,
of the
yeah.
nitpickers.
No, I didn't think that.
No, I mean, I'm just there are decision makers there, right?
Mm,
And I mean, on one level, it's easy to say that I forgive him when you know he's going to be punished. You
right.
know, I mean, it's like it's like is it really forgiveness? I mean, it's like the guy is going to be punished. It's sort of like take the term forgiveness as a pardon.
Mm,
Like when you get a loan forgiven, that means you don't have to pay it back,
mm,
right?
mm,
Um, it would be odd to say, I forgive you, but it's for me. You still have to pay it back.
mm,
I mean, it's like that's how it is, though, in this legal context. I mean, you're talking about murder.
mm.
Unless he got a pardon from the governor, but it would be very weird if he got, I don't know how it's being charged. Is it being charged as a state crime or as a federal crime?
Um, I don't actually know.
Okay. Yeah. So whoever the authority would be, I mean, usually murder is a state crime. Um, in that context, it was on
Mm,
state property. So if it was on, an army base, it would be federal. If it was
mm,
on, uh, Indian reservation or something like that. But if it's on state property, then it's normally a state crime,
mm,
and that would be the governor's prerogative to issue a pardon, just like the president has the prerogative for federal, right?
mm.
So, um, in the case of a governor saying, I imagine how you'd feel if the governor did that. I forgive him.
Mhm.
I mean, you'd feel very differently.
Well, you would feel in that case, if he was issuing a pardon by doing that, you would feel that he was almost
Well,
not doing his duty, right, as the governor, right?
that's what I'm saying is when it's issued like that, it feels unjust.
Mm,
It feels like no. I mean, especially if he hasn't repented.
right.
I mean, like, okay, if the governor, let's say somebody did do some heinous thing and he repented, right?
Mm,
Um, Maybe it's a stupid example, but I'll give you a federal example. Okay. A federal example was from a long time ago. I'll pick an example that's not like controversial now. Well, there was a whiskey rebellion early in our history, and it was a really serious thing. It was a really, really serious thing during George Washington. George Washington himself got on a horse and led troops against these people. And
He was the real deal.
yeah, I mean, it would be like if, how much crap Trump gets if there's like a parade or if there's any kind of patriotic
Hmm.
anything. People go, oh my gosh, he's a fascist or whatever. That's what fascists do.
This would
Well,
be like Trump hopping into M1 Abrams tank and
exactly.
like,
It would be like if Trump was in the seat like the F-18. And, I mean, that's what George Washington did. And maybe it's a little different because he was a general and he did win a big war,
mm,
and it would be more like if General Grant got on
mm,
a or
or
Eisenhower.
Eisenhower. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, then we'd be like, okay, well, I guess
Yeah. He does know how to
yeah,
work the controls
he's
on a
been on a
tank,
tank. He's been on a tank before. He's had a gun in his hand before. But President Washington pardoned all those guys. But they did show some remorse first. I mean, it would
Mm,
have been weird if you did that without them showing any remorse. I mean,
right.
so I mean, it's like it's one thing if the guy says, "Oh my gosh, I cannot believe what I did. I cannot believe the level of my guilt and the horrific nature of my crime." And then the governor says, "Okay, well, we'll issue a pardon." It'd be very different if the guy people are celebrating the murder. They're
Hmm.
celebrating the murder on public property. These people expect to keep their jobs even when they're celebrating murder.
Hmm.
And the guy himself is totally unrepentant. And then the governor says, I forgive you.
Right.
It would be taken the wrong way. It would
Right.
be like taken like you're weak. You, uh, you're trying. It would just be taken the wrong way.
Well, I
But
don't
I
think
don't
what
think
she,
any, yeah,
oh, sorry.
I don't think people interpreted what she did that way though.
No, no. I think what she was doing was different and is compatible with him being properly punished by the state. I mean, I think
Okay.
what she was doing was more like what Stephen did when he was being stoned, just basically praying to God, forgive them on my behalf.
Hmm.
It didn't it didn't mean that they didn't receive uh punishment, but it's it's an act you're doing in your own heart towards somebody, even though they might still get physical justice at the hands of the state or God, right? So I do think that what she did was appropriate and very impressive. Um, but I'm
So,
with you. I don't think it would be appropriate for us to for the state to pardon him
so
at
what
this
if
point.
she had said something like, instead of forgive, what if she had said something like, um, I'm not going to remain angry about this. I'm going to trust the Lord to move forward in a positive way. Um, and he's going to suffer for what he did. Um, but I'm not holding on to any kind of anger. Because I think actually she's able to not hold on to the anger
Mm,
precisely because he's not forgiven. He's not forgiven. He's
mm,
going to be punished.
mm-hmm.
What I mean by forgiveness is you're not going to be punished. Like it would be very weird if we got to heaven and okay, it'd be weird if we died, you know, and Jesus says, I forgive you, but that's for me. So I'm not angry at you. You're going to hell still. And
Right.
then you find yourself in hell, and you're like, whoa, wait, I thought you said you forgave me, and Jesus is like, no, no, that was to protect me. I was holding a lot of anger. I had a hard time moving forward when you stole that candy bar when you were 8. Um, I was pissed.
Well,
And, because I was told, like, you need salvation when you steal a candy bar when you're 8, and it requires repentance. You don't just have somebody go, he doesn't know what he's doing, pray for him.
mhm.
I mean, because like otherwise it would be like Stephen, the people that were stoning Stephen, they got forgiven for that particular sin, but the other sins that they did know about, they didn't get. It's
Hmm.
just it brings up this paper that Doug Givett. Did you ever have a class with Doug Givett?
I made it through tablet without any of Doug's classes. I have met him, but
Oh,
yeah, I didn't have any of his classes.
oh man. Okay. Well, I wanted to do a whole podcast episode on this topic, but it won't be this one, but we could at least get it going. I'll just let you know what he said in this paper.
Okay.
In this paper, he sent it to me by email before it was published, and it was ended up being published in actually Mike Austin, one of Mike Austin's books.
Hmm.
It was called Being Good, and it was edited by Guyvit and Austin. Christian Virtues for Everyday Life or something like that, and it's called On Forgiveness.
Oh, interesting.
And the the whole dispute, I think, is, and I've talked to Doug about this in person, was whether forgiveness requires repentance. Um, and Doug takes the position that it does. And then there's another side that says it doesn't, and I think it's called the therapeutic model of forgiveness, where we
Hmm.
forgive. But then the question is theologically, like, why does God forgive?
Hmm.
And it's obviously not really therapeutic for him. I mean, I don't think so.
Right.
But it's interesting. It's an interesting debate. I'd like to do a whole episode on it at some
It is
point.
interesting. And I mean, it seems like what Stephen was modeling is an attitude or disposition of our own
Hmm.
hearts, even though we don't ultimately control whether or not the person we're asking or forgiving is granted a spiritual legal pardon, right?
Yeah.
Jesus can do that. God can do that. But we don't have that jurisdiction. But it does seem it's kind of like when we say, oh, I'm praying for you, it shows a certain disposition of our heart, even though we don't, God is not a force. We can't command that the outcome we're praying for happens. So it seems like what Erica was doing was showing that her disposition was not hatred toward this person that most people, I think, would have hated in that context.
Hmm.
Um, and I, so I don't see that there's a gross incompatibility here, but I am interested in this subject. I'd be interested to read this book.
Yeah. I was hoping that they had the table of contents available. But looks like they're not going to give me the table of contents. Maybe they
You
have
have
a
to pay for that.
flyer. I don't know. It seems like the table of contents would be one of the first things you would offer, but anyway, it's in there, that paper. It's a rich topic.
Yeah.
And yeah. Uh was there anything that disturbed you about that memorial service at all, or
I would say disturbed, but I would say that I wasn't impressed by everybody's remarks. I mean, I've heard varying takes on Trump's remarks, for example, but in my own
Hmm.
opinion, I would have been perfectly content for Erica to have been the keynote and then no speeches after that, because there was no topping that. And then Trump, gets up there and says, I think he's mostly trying to make a joke, but I don't think he was entirely joking that he hates his enemies.
I thought that
But
was refreshing to hear. I love that
well, I think
because he was just being honest.
he was being, that's one of the great things about Trump is that he will always be Trump.
Hmm.
You're always getting the real him, for good or for ill.
Uh-huh.
Um, there were, I don't remember the details of everybody's speeches, but I remember that there were some that I kind of thought were okay, or I'm not sure about that. But then there were a lot that I was really impressed by. I mean, symbolically, I was very impressed that there were so many people from the cabinet there. And
Yeah.
then among the cabinet, I mean, if you listen to uh, Hegseth's speech, Rubio's speech, I was very impressed by those. I mean, Rubio basically gave the entire gospel in 90 seconds, to include the second coming, which I was very impressed by. And so there were things like that. Um, and I just thought only God could have taken something like this and brought together not only so many people in basically a worship service, but also the most powerful people in the entire world all in the same room. And by the way, not just the White House, but I mean, Elon was there. I was sitting probably a couple hundred feet from Elon, from, Tucker, from uh, Glenn Beck. There was lots of others, people that I probably should have recognized and didn't. And And to me, there was something very symbolic and powerful about that, just that image of having everybody there in this context. But um, were there any speeches that stood out to you or that you were kind of disturbed by?
I didn't watch the whole thing yet, but I did want to say something about just because I've covered this topic before
Mm,
on the podcast, and so I always like to link things when I can, link topics. I'm doing a thing where every I read scripture every episode now. I started doing it before Charlie was shot,
mm,
and then I didn't do it here, but we're going to end up having a little bit of scripture here. This is the book of Revelation, um, New International Version. You can use any different ones, but there's a letter to the church in Smyrna. Here's the church in Ephesus. I mean, look at right here. It's interesting. Just the book of Revelation is actually, I think it's a letter, or it says it's a letter to the churches, but it's also a letter to specific churches, which are meant for every church.
mm,
And here's the Revelation, and the word hatred comes up, and it says, you know, you have this in your favor, verse 6. You hate the practices of the Nicolaitans, which I also hate.
mm,
This is Jesus speaking. And it's like you don't think of Jesus hating things, but it's right there. We don't know who the Nicolaitans were, but this is this was a compliment, and the problem was that they had forsaken their love. So they hadn't, if an ideal church is one that has God's aversions and hate and loves,
mm.
they had lost their love, but they had the right aversions. I wonder if that's where Trump is. I think he has
Maybe.
some aversions. He has some hatreds. Maybe he needs to work on the love part. I don't know, but my point is that this has come up in the podcast here. I'm just doing a quick search on YouBoob here just to point out that the word hatred. I think, yeah. Let me share the screen. Feel free to call me Sharon. I don't mind. Just for today, we've had anger, hatred in the Bible, hatred in the normative Christian tradition. So this is 1 year ago.
Mm,
Let me see here. Let me just get the date here. April 18th, 2024. So you could just, my point is that we've had, on this podcast, we've had the discussion about hatred and the Christian tradition. And there are some quotations that from like Psalms, for example. I've been reading Psalms.
mm. Those
It says
imprecatory
God,
uh,
God hates certain
verses.
things.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
I mean, the fact that Trump says that it's like God hates his enemies. Well, it says that in the Psalms.
Right.
Um, Trump is actually more biblical than a lot of Christians are. um, I don't know.
You're going to get some
It's just,
emails about that one, but but I mean, you're right. I mean, there's some Christians who barely qualify based on behavior, but I don't
well,
know. I
yeah, it's very uncomfortable to talk about the word hatred. It's not like our first foot forward, but it's definitely biblical to hate the right things. I mean, you can't be good without hating evil. And, um, so that's part of the hornet's nest I kicked. And I'm not trying to be, nitpicky. I
sure,
guess
yeah.
my wife would say I don't have to try. It comes naturally. It's not even hard, but getting clear about these terms, I guess. I don't want to be too much of a Philbot or whatever, but
Yeah, well, I
Right.
do think there's a distinction though, but I mean that verse in Revelation says you
Yep.
you hate the practices of the Nicolaitans. I think it's
Yeah.
right that there are practices we should hate. We know there are practices that God hates.
Hmm.
Um, and I'm not sure that that's what Trump was saying. And I don't want to read too much into that because uh, I have no idea what he ultimately was trying to say. But I don't think Trump has a robust, personally has a robust sense of, these sorts of distinctions or anything like that. I mean, I do think he uh, is he's being honest about things that most people just sort of keep to themselves and don't just say. And so it comes across as very shocking when you hear somebody say very openly, especially on the heels of Erica forgiving her husband's assassin, that he in fact hates his enemies. But I do think he was partially just trying to make light of. Yeah, I mean, in Trump's position, how do you, and being him, how do you follow a speech like that appropriately? He
Yeah.
did it in his own way, I think. But I mean,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
did.
Yeah, exactly. I think Trump is like, well, let's think about the word enemy.
Mhm.
The Christian command to love your enemies is really hard
It is,
to
yes.
understand. I mean, I take it as just a good faith. I think Trump was like, I don't know how you do that. I'm
Yeah,
not sure. I'm not sure I understand what you're saying.
right,
But a lot of my students have been there. Like, how do you love your enemies?
right. Well, and even those of us who try or who appreciate that as a virtue in practice, it's very, very difficult to actually do that. I
Hmm.
mean,
Yeah.
I fail at doing that all the time. So
Right.
yeah, it's really hard.
Yeah.
The hardest thing, and that's why I was so impressed, I think, by Erica, because she had every right to get up there and not have that sort of attitude. There were, I appreciated that there were a lot of lighthearted moments in the whole ceremony. I appreciated Don Jr.'s impression of his father,
Oh,
criticizing
I
him for
missed that.
having social media posts that were too extreme. He said, "Yeah, so uh, Dad texts me. He's like, Don, you're getting a little aggressive on social media, Don. So that got a good laugh out of everybody. Um, and so there were some things like that. Um, I'm trying to think of any other particular speeches that stood out.
Did Elon get up there and talk?
He didn't talk,
Okay.
but he was there for a good chunk of it. And uh, I
That's
did
that's
see
amazing to me.
it was amazing, and I did see some clips of interviews that he did while he was there. People came up to
Yeah.
him, the news reporters, and asked him questions. And I mean, he seemed genuinely moved. He wasn't just making an appearance
No.
or he wanted to be there, and he felt very strongly about it. And I've seen some of his posts about it, and it seems like I mean, he even retweeted Erica's thing that said "Go to church," which I thought very interesting. I mean, Elon's an interesting guy, right? I don't know what he's up to most of the time, but the fact that he has such a following and just is willing to even repeat those things, I think is impressive.
My take on their little spat, him and Trump earlier in the year,
Mm,
was that I think Elon worked his freaking tail off for the country. He didn't ask for anything in return. He didn't ask for any power or anything like that.
mm,
He's already got all the money he needs or wants. His companies took a major hit.
mm.
His brand was getting trashed, literally,
He had very little to
as the
gain by
kids
doing
say.
that. Yeah.
I mean, it was one of the most purest. It was one of the purest expressions of patriotism I think I've ever seen. A lot of the people don't have eyes to see or ears to hear what I'm saying.
Mm.
And these are people that would be celebrating or just not caring about the murder of Charlie.
By the
But the
way, in certain polls, when people asked, "Do you think it would be acceptable to use violence to uh, like attack or murder Elon or Donald Trump in those polls?" I mean, Elon is specifically named in one of these polls that I've seen, and a surprisingly high number of people said yes. Mostly left leaning, obviously, but that's crazy to me.
yeah,
I mean, what I think
yeah,
that's very serious evidence of a cultural problem that we really need to get ahead of.
yeah. And I think this, going back to the spat that they had, I think that Elon was insulted, that the Congress reacted the way it did to all his work, and that Trump didn't push back more on Congress. And so that's my take on all that. And so they had this spat, and it spilled out into social media, and it got ugly. And then Elon was talking about starting like a third party.
I remember that. I
Okay, and
thought,
so this is all
don't do it,
like,
Elon.
there's always these pressures. There's all these pressures to split the unity, and a lot of the pressure comes from within.
Mm,
And I'm working in church administration, and I've studied church history pretty carefully, and um, it's the same thing in church history, same exact thing. There's these pressures within that split the unity. In fact, Jesus says basically that one of the things I like the best is unity, and he says it because it's so hard. It's
mm,
exactly the opposite of what you want to do. So that's why I was very impressed that Charlie, and I'm giving Charlie the credit here, but I'm also giving Elon and Trump the credit that they were able to come together in this overtly Christian context and honor Charlie, some 31-year-old kid. I mean,
yeah, that was impressive.
he's still a kid to me. I mean, like I met him when I went in 2018, and I remember thinking, gosh, he was like what, 24, 23 or something at the time. I remember thinking he was just a kid.
Hmm.
That's what I thought of him. And Candace was there, and that's when they were hanging out.
Mm,
And Candace wasn't as she's different now than she was back then.
yes.
But but um but yeah, I remember thinking, gosh, he's so young and he's so naive. He doesn't know what he's up against.
Mm. Well, that was
Um
probably true. I mean,
yeah, it was true.
you know,
I think it was true. It doesn't mean he was wrong, but
yeah.
in fact, if he didn't know, that might have been why he continued
Hmm.
for a little while. But I was so impressed by the unity. That's what impressed me, because there's
Hmm.
always pressure. The default is always disunity, always.
Right.
That's why we lose. I mean, the Democrats are always in lockstep because they somehow have enough unity. They're always able to figure out the key missing puzzle piece in the unity issue. And that's exactly what Charlie threatened on campus. It's like that old scriptural reference that Lincoln picked up: a house divided against itself cannot stand.
Hmm.
That's originally from Satan. I mean, that's originally Jesus talking about Satan.
Hmm.
Satan's smart enough to know that. That's why that's evidence that what I'm doing is not satanic, because I'm
Hmm.
going against Satan. Um, in the biblical context, in the American context where Abraham Lincoln picks it up, it's different. I'm talking about the Civil War, but and slavery, but here Charlie was creating a divided house on campus, and that's why it could not stand. Satan is smart enough to know that, so that's why the satanic toxicity came of the campuses came out on Charlie.
Hmm.
And it came out on Charlie way before he was murdered,
Hmm.
including his murder. But it was Charlie basically had a SEAL team, almost half a platoon of definitely a squad, more than a squad of guys that were the best. They
Hmm.
were, special operator, special warfare guys, and highly trained security detail. By the way, I would hate to be on the security detail and have that happen
Yeah.
to my principal.
Right.
I can't imagine what they're going through, those guys,
Yeah.
um, to to miss that, and then have to rush him to the hospital, and
Mm.
you're the whole time you're thinking that was my job,
Mm. Yeah, it's got to
and
be terrible.
I can't imagine. But he had those guys for years, and Ben Shapiro too. And these guys, they have these
They
for
have to.
years.
Yeah.
And people don't understand. This is not a one-off event. This is a lifestyle
Right.
because of the campuses, because a house divided against itself cannot stand. And that's what he was doing. That's the work he was doing, is dividing the house. And that's what I was doing on campus. That's why I know that a lot of the toxicity came out on me. And I didn't have a security detail.
And what's really disconcerting is that there aren't more people who are objective enough and can set their political leanings aside enough to say, whatever someone's beliefs, we can't have a culture that requires people to have full-time security because they're just out there talking about ideas. You know, oh, I'm sorry, hold on. Sorry, my two
Everything
and a
okay?
yep, 2.5-year-old found a spider and she wanted to let me know about it. So
Oh,
told her I'll
this
totally
is a
let you know.
very important thing.
Yes. When you're two, there your priorities are very different.
No, though,
But
that's the same priorities. I still have those priorities.
um, yeah, maybe I shouldn't have dismissed her. Maybe it's a very big spider. I don't know. But I just think that it's what's really alarming. It's not that there are people out there who want to do the sorts of things that they did to Charlie, because there will always be those people. There's people on the left and the right who want to do terrible things to people because ultimately they're evil, regardless of what their political leanings are. But um, that we have this broad cultural phenomenon now that anybody who's out there, particularly on the conservative side, being very overt about certain conservative ideas, which um, honestly, many of which are should be utterly uncontroversial, talking about, the importance of the family unit and, there are only two sexes and all that sort of thing,
Mhm.
have to go around with full security details now in order to be able to talk about those things is that's wild and that's very concerning.
Yeah.
Um, you know, and same and more broadly, the same problem applies to the number of people who actually don't seem like they really want free speech, right? I mean, this is the left clearly in general, and I'm not really speaking about moderate Democrats because I don't think this really applies to them, but a large portion of the left side of the aisle is more of the progressive bent,
Mhm.
and progressives actually aren't in favor of free speech, which is why they tend to show up to academic lectures with air horns instead of arguments, and why they try to shout down their opponents, and they, you especially in the context of uh, like the Gaza situation with Israel, you've got all these people out there who otherwise have no affiliation or connection to Hamas whatsoever. They're just in favor of revolution because, like whether they know it or not, that's kind of a Marxist idea, and they sort of absorbed that. But free speech was not a part of anything that Marx
Right.
believed or taught, right?
No.
And you're seeing this in the UK, right? I mean, they do not have free speech over there,
Right.
and I think a lot of people who otherwise were maybe apolitical or at least not very politically engaged realized that what happened to Charlie was a very arresting example of of what's happening more broadly with respect to the undermining of the bedrock of our country, which is the First Amendment. I mean, if you don't have that, you really don't have much else, right? I mean, you could argue the Second Amendment's there to protect the First Amendment,
Yeah.
uh, and so we, for lack of a better term, we just have to fight like absolute hell to make sure that that is preserved. And I mean, I felt a personal conviction to be a little bit more bold. I mean, I've always wanted to be bold, but and have in certain contexts. But you just, I think I felt a greater conviction to be bolder in contexts where I otherwise would not, for the sake of that, and I think other people are feeling that too.
Yeah. Thanks for saying that. That's really encouraging for me to hear. Um, there's a couple different ways I could go. I think I'm going to choose to talk about just briefly something that surprised me doing this podcast, which was so many people that were willing to come on and share their expertise or their perspective. And it's really cool. It's really awesome. Um, Something that was slightly disappointing is seeing a handful of people that um, wanted to have their episode taken down or edited in some way and then put back up or something. And do you mind if I talk about that for a sec?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, it was maybe I took it too hard, but it was really demoralizing to me.
Mm,
I was like, after all the freaking crap that I've been through, and you are embarrassed. It turned out like there is nothing embarrassing about these particular episodes at all. In
mm.
fact, they only shined. It only makes them look good. The only thing is they just didn't like the word Republican. That's that's what shows up when
Mm.
you search on them. Now, that word
That was bad for
Republican.
their brand.
Well, it was just so odd. I mean, in at least a couple cases, in three of the cases I'm thinking of, um, they were all women and they were all trying to get a job. Okay, so I was like, this is what it tells me that now this is not the entirety of the cases. I mean,
Mm.
they're not all that fitting that description, but and there wasn't very many. There was, half a dozen or something like that. But which as many episodes as we've done, that's not too bad. But just that they were censoring themselves. That's the issue that's bothering me is that they didn't just take responsibility for what they said and what they believed. They were censoring themselves because of fear.
Hmm.
They were afraid. It's not like they didn't really believe that stuff. It's that they were afraid. They were afraid that they would be punished, and it's
Which
like
is sad. Yeah.
that's why Charlie was murdered. It's this fear, and it's like it's embarrassing to me. It's embarrassing that we live in a culture where we can have all this material wealth and security and all these constitutional rights and stuff like that, and people still self-censor. I mean,
Mm.
it's like what people do in the novel 1984.
Mm.
They recheck everything they say, and
It's got to be a new speak. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, it's an assault on the freedom of association, which is what segregation was. Um, Segregation was a top-down assault on from the government on freedom of association.
Yep.
And it's the same Democratic Party that hate it now. They don't like freedom of association. And um,
Well,
it's
this is, oh, go ahead.
no good.
This is one of the reasons Jordan Peterson originally got famous was he just was not going to be made to say something that was not true, that he knew was not true,
Mm,
right? And so I've thought too, thankfully I haven't worked for anybody who made me do something like this, but if anybody ever compelled me or tried to compel me to put, say, pronouns in my email signature, I've told people I would literally rather be dragged across broken glass than be made to sort of kowtow to that whole paradigm, right?
hmm
And I think you're seeing a little bit of a shift in that direction where people who kind of maybe previously went along with it because of the social pressures, they were afraid of losing their job, whatever, are more willing to push back a little bit, or at least they're not receiving the same pressures they otherwise would be, which is good. I'm hoping that we see a continued change in that direction. But I think regardless, maybe even especially when the pressures are very strong, we have to be willing to take some flack. And there might be real consequences for that. And I think that's where the rubber meets the road. Charlie was clearly willing to uh, do whatever he needed to do and say what he needed to say, regardless of the death threats. And he's like, well, I'm just going to hire security and I'm just going to keep doing it. It's sad that he had to do that. It's sad that other people have to do that. But I think each of us in our own way needs to be bold like that, right? And I mean, you're in the thick of it. You're a professor. You work with students. Um, what's your take on? Has anything shifted for you in the aftermath of Charlie being shot, or Have you had conversations with colleagues that are relevant to that?
Um, nothing to speak of because I'm not really teaching on campus right now. I was helping a Christian college here in California, but they're a little bit far behind to benefit
Hmm.
from my help right now. I'm not sure how much I'm going to be able to help them.
Hmm.
But yeah, I'm just doing church administration right now. Um, I was laid off from Azusa Pacific in 2023.
Oh, gotcha.
In spring of 2024, I was not teaching, which has actually worked out okay because we had some really tough challenges to navigate as a church that I needed to be available for,
Hmm.
and was able to successfully navigate those challenges with our rental space and our landlord and getting a subtenant, and there was a lot of other administrative challenges that I had to kind of sort out financially and stuff like that.
Hmm.
So it was a different skill set, and I made the decision to keep the podcast going and to continue on being available for teaching when it comes up. And I think I'll be available probably coming up pretty soon. Um, but yeah, so I can't really speak to that. Um,
Sure.
but but I do keep in touch with former colleagues, and I have seen disturbing things from them. But it's nothing I didn't expect. Um, just it's the typical stuff. I don't know why they think that. I don't know what they're thinking as far as whether they're going to have a job.
Hmm.
Because my thought is, why would you just assume this institution is going to continue along when so many people can clearly see it's a waste of money?
Hmm.
And I mean, you have half the country that is bothered that a young man like that had to do that job and then was killed for it.
Hmm.
And then your response to it, and you're crying over Jimmy Kimmel. I
Interesting.
mean, look, we still have episodes that are censored by YouTube, this podcast right now from the
Hmm.
Biden administration. They're
Wow.
still censored.
Because they're
And
talking about a certain flu vaccine or
no, no, I mean, the thing is if you've never been censored, you probably don't know, but it's like, let me see if I can show you. I'm not even sure. Maybe I'm not sure if it'll show up, but it'll
it
mm,
shows which videos have been blacklisted by the
it'll
AI
yeah, yeah, yeah,
powers that
yeah,
be.
yeah. I think let me see here. There's a way to do this. Here's the channel. Okay, yeah, yeah. Let me show you what I'm talking about. Heidi. Okay, yeah, yeah. Um, this is it says published. Okay.
Maybe it was
What
shadow banned. Tells you it's published, but really nobody can see it.
there's got to be a way for me to do the date. Okay, I'd figured it out here. Um, Here we go. Um, can you see this?
Hmm.
Okay, there it is right there. Do you see it?
Yeah.
Okay. You see, it says restrictions.
Hmm.
Okay, you see terms and policies.
Yeah.
This video has been removed because of inappropriate content. This is the one on Lance Wall now. Lance Wall now. 15 likes, 236 views before it was removed. I don't know if you can see that
Did
or
you
not.
appeal it?
Oh yeah.
And that just goes into
Oh
the
yeah.
ether?
Let me show you Heidi's really quick. Here's another one. Terms and policies. 61 views. They got down before too many people saw it. And by the way, she was running for Congress.
Hmm.
So this is election interference as far as I'm concerned. Biden administration election interference. The ironic thing was she was running against somebody that Trump um, endorsed. That's the
Do you,
ironic thing.
do you think they took it down specifically because of pressures from the Biden
Oh
administration?
yeah, yeah. This is Biden censorship. This is Biden
Yikes.
censorship, and then so I'm showing this to you now. The thing is that these are still on Apple Podcasts, so you can listen to these episodes and see for yourself whether it was inappropriate content.
Hmm.
Anybody can do this, and I have the emails. I have the emails I could show you. Each one of these were called dangerous. That was
Hmm.
the word they used was dangerous. So you could listen to those episodes and see what was dangerous. What in the world was dangerous? And I'm still censored. We're still censored here on the podcast.
At this point, it almost means you said something right that they want to take it down.
Yeah. Yeah. But the thing here's the thing though, is that when you get one of those, you get a warning, then you get a strike, and then you get a second strike. If you get three strikes, your channel's gone. So this was threatening the entire channel
Hmm.
because they had three taken down. The way they do it is they don't tell you what part violated. They don't tell you anything about which minute, which second.
Hmm.
They don't tell you which specific policy was violated. They just use these adjectives.
Seems like they should at least be able to tell you what policy was violated.
They don't tell you what part violated what exactly. They don't it's so vague. It's
It's
worse
very
than the
strange.
government. It's actually
Hmm.
worse than the government. So when you appeal, you have no idea. You're it's like you have no idea what to say because you don't know what the problem was. They don't tell you. So you don't even know how to all you have to guess what they think, and they say,
It's
"Well, just review our policies." Well, but I don't know what your interpretation of the policy is because I didn't think I violated anything.
right.
And it's certainly not dangerous, you know. And so um it's like it's one of these things where um when Kimmel was pulled off briefly,
Hmm.
and people were freaking out about that. I was like, and people, I even saw people going, "You guys are hypocritical." I was like, the hypocrisy would be if the rule is not applied equally, whatever the rule
Hmm.
is. You know, the rule is I get censored. That's the rule right now.
Hmm.
That's I'm being censored right now, and I'm constantly being threatened to be taken off.
Yeah,
And
it's not healthy.
yeah, it's purely political. It's obviously political, and you know that's why I didn't care about Kimmel. Like, why would I care about him?
Yeah, well, I didn't care about. I mean,
That would be like the rule is now being uh, applied equally. The hypocrisy is when people don't care about people like me getting censored. That's the hypocrisy.
right.
Um, and it's like there's something else about this that's pretty devastating, I think, which it's it's that you don't know what you can't see. I mean, like you if you can't see this video, then you never knew about it. You
Hmm.
never knew it was censored. Whatever is censored, you don't know it was censored.
Right.
So there's no way to have a conversation. And for a long time, I couldn't even talk about it. I couldn't show this stuff because they would, the entire Vimeo channel that we
Hmm.
had was shut down. When I posted those videos on Vimeo, the entire channel went down.
Wow.
And they again said this is dangerous content and all that stuff. And I was like,
Well,
wow. Still up on Rumble.
Daily Wire is trying to create an alternative media company, so maybe they just need to create a YouTube alternative where they're
Yeah,
just not going to take down ideas they disagree with.
right. I think Charlie Kirk is a hero. And I'm
I
just
agree.
blown away. I wish I could have gone to that memorial. I'm blown away that he seems to have possibly healed to some extent a rift between Elon and Trump.
Mhm.
And just the fact that you have the president, the vice president, you have this cabinet, you have Elon
Mhm.
Musk, you have all these people like yourself willing to be so uncomfortable. You're like at Denny's at 3 a.m. You're
Yeah.
sweating. Um, and for somebody you never met. Did you ever meet him?
No, never met
No.
him. I didn't even know. Again, I didn't even follow him very closely
Yeah.
until after he was killed, really.
I mean,
So,
I have a program from an event he was at that he's not even the headliner.
mhm.
He was just a guy, he was just another guy on the in the lineup in 2018. That's how he was. And I remember meeting him and talking to him, but it's like that this kid he brought the country together. I'm talking about the federal government. I mean,
Yeah.
just just obviously hated, but that and then it was done in a Christian environment. Like, would you say it was Orthodox Christian?
Yes. Yeah. I was blown away because, I'm even when I go, if I go to someone else's church and I hear a sermon or something, I can't help but sort of have my radar up a little bit. I'm just kind of
Yeah.
always assessing and auditing and trying to make sure, is this actually, uh, in keeping with the scriptures and all that.
Uh-huh.
Sometimes to a fault, I mean, I sometimes probably overdo it, but I just want to make sure that we're um, believing the right things, learning the right things.
Yeah.
But so I went in there with a little bit of that, and again, there were definitely some things I disagreed with, but overwhelmingly, I was blown away by the consistency of the orthodoxy that I was hearing, not only from the worship, but also the talks. I mean, when Rob McCoy did the altar call, I was like, okay, we're not doing a merely political event here. We're doing
Mhm.
this is church, right?
Wow.
Um, and so yeah, I was totally struck from the very beginning, and then just kind of enraptured the whole time. And despite being exhausted, we were just very grateful to have been there and to have participated in that. Um, and I've also just been very impressed with the fallout. I shouldn't use the word fallout. The effect, hence the memorial.
Mm.
Because like I mentioned, the Uber driver, even my Uber driver last night, a different guy who happened to be a an Iraqi Christian who moved here 16 years ago, a very strong believer. Him and I were talking. Charlie Kirk came up in that conversation, and I
Wow.
didn't bring it up. He mentioned it, and
No way.
and uh, so there's just you can see that there's such a large blast radius in a positive way from this, and I don't think we'll maybe truly appreciate all of the outcome, because obviously God is doing things behind the scenes we'll never see. But I did hear somebody say that maybe as many as 100 million people streamed that event, and that if that's the case, that's the largest single presentation of the gospel in the history of the world, which is pretty wild. This
That's
31-year
crazy.
old guy just out there talking about Christianity and talking about conservative values, and
Mm.
the result of his murder was that. Pretty
Yeah.
cool.
I see God's hand in that. I don't know how you can't. And there's always the nitpickers. It seemed like
Mhm.
you were in a discussion about political violence recently
Hmm.
on Facebook.
Yeah.
Um, and I was totally rooting you on.
Well, I
I
actually
always
think,
I
oh, go
always
ahead.
sigh when Bradley gets on there because he's always a nitpicker.
I
So
actually I had responded to one of his remarks, and I think Facebook ate it because maybe it had links that it didn't like or something, and I had too much going on, so I didn't go back and bother to try and repost it or anything. But
hmm.
I was like, that's weird. I posted it, I didn't see it, and then I went and I saw that in my timeline it said I had posted it, but I couldn't find
Hmm.
it. It said this post had been removed or something. I don't know. It's weird. But
Oh, geez.
yeah, you know, the discussion was about whether or not there's a difference in the way broadly that the left sanctions violence than the right does. And my point was, yes, there are people who have right-leaning views who commit acts of political violence.
Hmm.
Um, but mostly on the right, you don't see that there's a permission structure for endorsing that. You see people, I mean, you look at the Hortmans, right? nobody on the right, as far as I can tell, was celebrating that or condoning that or
No,
saying they had it coming or anything like that, remotely like that.
no.
But the reaction from the left to Charlie's assassination was very, very different. And there are exceptions to that. I mean, you've got Van Jones, you have Bill Maher. These guys were not uh, celebrating that at all. They were,
No.
saying, "Hey, you guys should stop celebrating that," right? Talking to their own party.
Yeah,
But
even Gavin Newsom came
yeah,
out, and I that makes sense because they had a personal connection.
right. He was on his podcast,
Yeah,
um, but so my contention is that there's a broader portion of the mainstream left, which I think is mostly progressive, that does sort of, if not advocate for that sort of action, at least condone it, or they just have the ideological bedrock that makes it possible for these people who are really going to act on that to do so. And I mean, there was lots of tap dancing on social media by people who, I mean, even
yeah.
professors. I saw professors who apparently thought that they were going to have no repercussions for basically saying good riddance, in response to something like this, which is an outrageous thing to think that somebody could say and think that they're just going to, remain employed teaching students when they're celebrating the death of a student at the hands of an assassin. I mean,
At taxpayer expense.
well, I shouldn't say death of a student, but on a college campus, right, talking to students.
Mm.
But yes, at taxpayer expense. So yeah, I mean that there to me, there's a very clear asymmetry happening here, and so I get very annoyed when people are like, well, but also there's people on the right who commit violence. Yes, there are, but I don't think you have to try very hard to make the case that the attitudes broadly between left and right are different with respect to acts of political violence like this, right? And you see that. I mean, there's plenty of examples. I actually got exhausted watching people
Yeah.
say vile things about
Oh yeah.
Charlie Kirk and about his
Yeah,
family,
and
all this stuff. And
the research that Bradley posted, which was not clear exactly, it seemed like there was like a screenshot of something, or and it wasn't even clear what the source was. But
I read the
anyway,
study, but
did it
it
was it there? Was there a link to a study?
yeah, I read the study.
Okay.
It was basically assessing the political beliefs of people who had committed what were presumably political acts of violence from like the early 90s to uh, 2019 or something like that, right? Which
One of the things I would be interested in is acts of violence. Does that include vandalism? Does that include property crime? Does that include arson, for example? Um,
I don't think this study
Basically,
included
any of
any of
the
this stuff.
riots
Yeah,
from
yeah, yeah,
2020.
right.
The threats, does that count as violence? Threats? If you brandish a firearm, that's considered a violent crime.
Mhm.
Um, a threat is a violent crime, I think. A s- so I think that it's cherry picking data, and
Mhm.
like even what you said, which was an obvious one, I thought was a lovely thing that you pointed out about abortion. It's like, oh
Oh
yeah,
yeah,
who are we including here
exactly.
as
Yeah.
victims?
Yeah,
It
because
seems
there's
like
only
we're
one party that endorses that. I mean, there are people on the right who get abortions, but the
yes,
right as a platform doesn't endorse abortion for any reason.
no,
The
no,
left
no,
does, and how many tens of millions of people is that we're leaving out for convenience, right?
yeah. So yeah, it's just shows the importance of how methodology and you can lie with statistics pretty easily
Hmm.
if you build it right. But I didn't have the time or the energy to get back into that. I assumed that it did not include, based on I think it was something that Gary said, which was he totally Gary I think um, misunderstood what the right and left were. I think, and that's a foundational question too. When you use the terms like right and left, what do you mean? Um, and it seems like he was conflating. I think he said Mao was on the right or something. I was like, oh my!
Yeah, well,
If you get that wrong, you're going to be we're not going to see eye to eye on that.
I'm not trying to overcomplicate the discussion by including what left and right means in the context of
Sure.
different
Yeah.
governments and societies. That's way
Yeah.
too complicated. It's hard enough to get clear about that in the US, right? But
Oh, big time. Yeah. And I gotta plug the podcast again. I'm going to show. my screen one more time. Um, and I'm going to just show the term. Let's see here. Left. Let's see what happens here. Okay, yeah, there's a video that we did called What is Left, What is Right?
Hmm.
A study of political extremism. And it's let me just get the date here. Um, March 6, 2024. And I go into that a little bit and just some of
Hmm.
my some helpful things that would be helpful, I think, in thinking about that topic there. So
I'll have
I
to give that
think
one a
that
listen.
yeah, it's about government power. It's
Hmm.
about government power, and I think that's the proper way to understand left versus right is government power. That's why I think Gary was wrong
Hmm.
in that Gary DeWeese. But did you have anything else you wanted to talk about or mention about that? Anything related?
I think I already mentioned some of the personal conversations I've had with people that were sort of connected to that
Hmm.
event in strange ways. But I don't think I'm leaving anything out that I can think of. Um, I'm sure things will occur later, as they always do. And there's a lot of different directions we could go broadly about the political ramifications or
Yeah.
the societal trajectory that we're on. But as far as the event goes, I think those were the main points that I took away.
There's a lot to think about on
Mm.
this, and there's a lot to be happy about. There's a lot to be sad about. Um, but I'm glad you're on my team, man. I just, I, when I think about where we are compared to like the 90s, do you remember
Mm.
the 90s very well? I don't know how old you
Yes.
are.
I was born in '87, so
Oh,
I do
okay.
consider myself a '90s child.
Yeah.
I
All
wasn't
right.
probably in the loop politically very well in the '90s, but
Well, when I joined the Navy in 1992 when George Bush was president, they asked me if I was a homosexual. Um, I'm glad they didn't ask me if I was gay because I would have said, yeah, I think I'm pretty happy. Um, so, but they asked me if I was a homo, and I said no. And then Bill Clinton came on. This is when I was a senior. I was in the delayed entry program.
Mm.
And then Bill Clinton won the election in 1992. First thing he did in 1993 was don't ask, don't tell. Do you remember this policy? You probably
Yeah, I
don't
thought.
remember.
No, I do remember. I mean, that was the policy when I was in. It
Okay,
changed.
yeah.
It changed. I think Obama changed it at some point, right? But
What were your dates of service again?
2006, 2012.
Okay. So um yeah, so I went into boot camp in 1993, so you were 6. And um it was don't ask, don't tell. So uh it's weird to think that I believe that started a trajectory to now if you say there's a men and women are different, you need a SEAL platoon around you when you're on campus.
Right.
I mean, just like you can't make
Yeah.
this up.
Yeah.
So I'm very happy. Did you see Pete Hegseth's recent, like 8 days, 9 days ago, 10 days ago?
To all the generals.
Yeah, did you see that?
Yes, I
Did you-
watched it. Yeah.
What did you think of it?
I thought it was great. I
I did
thought
too.
I thought a lot of these highly politicized generals who maybe outside the Marine Corps, I think the Marine Corps generals were probably, clapping, but most of the guys on the ground probably were excited about the attitude. Okay, we're finally going to have some standards. The attitude is we're going to kick ass and forget about all this, political BS
Yeah,
that's infiltrated, the military because combat doesn't change just because you have different social experiments that you're interested in. So I appreciated it. I thought it was good. People gave him a hard time in the media, but I'm like, I really don't care very much about what those people think, especially people who've never been in that environment, right? And who never will have to.
I'm friends on Facebook with a professor friend who I went to seminary with, who was a captain in the Army, and his son is at West Point now. And he's one of these nitpickers. He has TDS, Trump
Hmm.
derangement syndrome, I'm sure it's actually documented on his medical record that he's got TDS. And and of course he did this like histrionic reaction to the Pete thing, Hegseth thing. And man, I just drilled into him. I was like, I'm an NCO, you know, and I'm going to tell you why I think you're totally off on this. But we had a spirited debate about that to the extent that you can. But there are people like that that are on my Facebook news feed, and
Hmm.
so I did watch it entirely with great care. And I see people complaining about the Department of War thing and stuff. To me, he explained that in that speech, and it made perfect
Hmm.
sense. You know, do you remember what he said? It was something
I don't
about,
remember specifically about that. No.
I mean, I could have told you what he meant before I watched it because I intuited that makes sense.
Hmm.
First of all, it goes back to the founding. That's what they called it at the founding. The reason they called it that is because they didn't have a constant, permanent defense posture. They were very suspicious of standing armies, right?
Hmm.
And that's why there's these provisions about, you know, the army can only have a 2-year budget, you know, stuff like that
Hmm.
in the Constitution. And yeah, they were really worried about constant vigilance or whatever.
Hmm.
It switched to the Department of Defense, and that's what he said. Department of War makes sense because war is something you choose, you train for, you want it to be short, you want it to be successful. Defense is like never ending
Hmm.
posture, right? And so, um, defense is when you get into these conflicts that drag on for years and years and years and cost trillions of dollars. That's what he was going for
Hmm.
was we need to be more focused on we don't want a permanent war. If you're at war, you need to call it that. It's
Hmm.
called war. And um, you know, I think he wants to go back to like Congress declaring war, you know.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Does
And
a does an appropriation, I mean, does the declaration have to be implicit? Can be explicit? An appropriation count as a declaration? These are questions that we can sort out later, but I think it is helpful to have, you know, an accurate description of what you're talking about. Um, so
I agree.
as
And
far
also
as
the
that
people
goes,
hyperventilating over the change, they're the same people who think that there are more than two sexes. So I
yeah,
really don't care very much about
very
that.
interesting how that works.
And I'm absolutely here for some of these symbolic gestures, like the Gulf of America. I'm like, you know what? That cost us zero, and it's yes, it is a pure political flex, but
uh,
it's about time we did a little bit of that once in a while.
yeah.
So yeah, the Department of War makes sense. I don't understand the problem.
Well,
Um,
you're a very thoughtful guy, and I love talking to you, and I think we need to have a cigar soon.
I think so. I appreciate that. But yeah,
Yeah.
let's there's a lot more to hash out and better done in person.
Okay. Sure.
So love
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll set that up soon, and thanks for coming on, Matthew.
Thank you. Well, thanks for having me. This was fun.
Yeah, it was fun. Let me see if I can figure out how to end this. It's been a while. Oh my gosh. Where did I go here? Here we go. I got it.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having me on.
Yeah.